Before it was a monument to decay, the obsidian palace was a beacon of power, its black spires piercing the clouds like daggers aimed at the heavens. But power is a heavy cloak, and its threads are often woven with deceit. Within these walls, a king, a queen, and a princess would play their parts in a tragedy penned by fate itself. The story begins not with a bang, but with a whisper, a promise made in the dead of night, a secret that would become the foundation of a kingdom and ultimately the catalyst for its ruin. The very air here is heavy with memory, thick with the ghosts of unspoken words and unshed tears. Listen closely, and you can almost hear them. The faint rustle of a silk gown in an empty corridor, the distant clang of a guard's armor, the phantom laughter of a child who would never grow old. This palace was a cage gilded in gold, and its inhabitants were prisoners of a destiny they could neither see nor escape. Their legacy is not one of glory, but a cautionary tale of how quickly light can be extinguished by the shadows of human greed. King Alaric was not born to wear the crown, he seized it. He emerged from the lesser noble houses, a man whose ambition burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns. While others saw a charismatic leader, a unifier of fractured lands, few saw the cold calculus that operated behind his piercing gaze. His ascent was a masterclass in political maneuvering, a symphony of broken promises and timely betrayals. He forged alliances in the shadows, whispering assurances to houses that had long been rivals, pitting them against the aging, complacent monarch. The final move was not a grand battle, but a quiet coup, a bloodless transition, the official histories would claim. But the stones of the palace courtyard knew better. They remembered the crimson stains scrubbed away before dawn, the loyal guards who vanished without a trace. King Alaric built his throne upon a foundation of ghosts, believing his iron will could keep them buried. He saw himself as a savior, a man destined to forge a new dynasty from the ashes of the old. He failed to understand that fire, once used, is not so easily controlled, and the debts incurred in darkness must always be paid in blood. To solidify his precarious reign, King Alaric needed more than fear. He needed legitimacy, a symbol of grace to temper his brutal reputation. He found it in Lady Isolde of the Serene Valley. Her arrival at the Obsidian Palace was like the first sunrise after a long, bitter winter. With hair like spun moonlight and eyes that held the wisdom of ages, Queen Isolde was not merely a political bride. She was the kingdom's heart. Where the king was a storm, she was a calm harbor. Her patronage saw the arts flourish. Her counsel brought moments of mercy to the king's harsh justice, and her gentle presence won the love of the common people in a way Alaric's power never could. She walked the gardens, and flowers seemed to bloom brighter in her wake. She filled the cold, echoing halls with music and laughter, momentarily silencing the whispers that clung to the palace walls. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as if her light could purify the darkness in the king's soul and cleanse the foundations of his rule. But the queen was a rare flower planted in poisoned soil, and even the purest light cannot penetrate the deepest shadows. A year into their reign, the kingdom was blessed with the birth of Princess Lyra. She was a perfect fusion of her parents. She had her father's determined eyes but her mother's gentle soul. Her birth was the zenith of the kingdom's hope, a promise of a future untainted by the bloody past. For the first time, King Alaric's ambition seemed to soften, replaced by a fierce, paternal pride. He looked at his daughter and saw his legacy made flesh, the continuation of the dynasty he had bled to create. Queen Isolde, however, saw something far more precious, a pure, innocent life, a soul to be nurtured and protected from the corrupting influence of the court. The princess's laughter became the most cherished sound in the Palace of Whispers, a melody of innocence that briefly drowned out the scheming and secrets. She was the kingdom's jewel, a symbol of peace and prosperity. But innocence in a place of power is a fragile thing, like a butterfly caught in a spider's web. Princess Lyra was a beacon of light, unaware that she was born into a world where shadows were gathering, eager to devour her. But peace is a fleeting dream in a court built on ambition. The very nobles King Alaric had used to climb to power now watched him with envious eyes. They saw his devotion to the queen and his adoration for the princess not as strengths, but as weaknesses to be exploited. The whispers in the palace began to change. Once filled with praise for the royal family, they now carried the venom of jealousy and conspiracy. Whispers questioned the queen's influence over the king, planting seeds of doubt in his increasingly paranoid mind. Whispers spoke of old loyalties and forgotten promises, reminding those who felt overlooked of the king's bloody ascent. Shadows in the hallways seemed to lengthen and deepen, no longer just an absence of light, but a presence, a silent, watching entity. Queen Isolde felt the change in the atmosphere. She saw the furtive glances, the smiles that didn't reach the eyes, the way conversations would cease the moment she entered a room. The Palace of Whispers was beginning to live up to its name, and its secrets were starting to stir. The joy brought by his daughter's birth did not quell the fire of King Alaric's ambition, it merely fed it. His desire for a legacy became a ravenous hunger for absolute power. He no longer sought to rule his kingdom, but to conquer the world beyond its borders. He launched costly, brutal wars, draining the treasury and bleeding the countryside of its young men, all to carve his name deeper into the pages of history. He saw betrayal in every corner, dissent in every question. The king who once charmed his allies now ruled through fear. His council meetings became tirades, his decrees absolute and cruel. Queen Isolde's gentle counsel, once his trusted guide, was now dismissed as feminine weakness. He began spending more time in the war room than in the throne room, surrounded by maps and generals who echoed his thirst for glory. The king was forging a crown of continental dominance, but he was blind to the fact that its weight was crushing his own people, his own family, and his own soul. He was building an empire abroad while his kingdom rotted from within. As the king's heart hardened, Queen Isolde found herself trapped in a gilded cage of sorrow. The man she had married, the leader she had admired, was disappearing, replaced by a tyrant obsessed with his own reflection in the annals of history. Her days were spent maintaining a facade of serene elegance for the court, while her nights were spent weeping into her silk pillows, her tears unheard by anyone. The palace, once a home, now felt like a prison. The whispers followed her everywhere, cruel and mocking. She knew the nobles plotted, and she saw the suffering of her people in the desperate faces that lined the streets. But her attempts to reach the king were met with a wall of cold indifference. Alone and isolated, she began a dangerous quest for truth. Suspecting the roots of her husband's paranoia ran deeper than mere ambition, she delved into the secret histories of his rise to power, seeking the original sin that now poisoned their kingdom. Her struggle was a silent one, a desperate fight waged in the shadows to save the man she loved, and the daughter she cherished from a doom she could feel closing in around them. Princess Lyra grew up amidst this chilling opulence, a child aware of a sadness she could not name. The warmth of her early years was fading, replaced by the rigid formality of court life. Her father, once a smiling giant who placed her on his knee, was now a distant, formidable figure she saw only in ceremonies. Her mother, Queen Isolde, showered her with affection, yet the princess could always see a profound sadness lingering in her eyes. Lyra's life was no longer her own. It was a state asset. She was paraded before visiting dignitaries, her hand already being discussed as a bargaining chip in her father's grand political games. She learned to smile when she was sad, to curtsy when she wanted to run, to be silent when she wanted to scream. She was the kingdom's most precious pawn, her future a blank page upon which her father intended to write a treaty with a powerful ally. Her innocence was a flickering candle in the heart of a gathering storm, and powerful hands were already moving to decide when, and how, it would be extinguished. In the deepest, most dust-choked corner of the royal library, behind a false wall, Queen Isolde found it, the source of the rot. It was a treaty, not written in ink but sealed in blood. It was the pact King Alaric had made with the ruthless House Valerius, the very family whose support had been the linchpin of his coup. The price for their loyalty was not land or gold, but a promise that his firstborn child, Princess Lyra, would be wed to the Valerius heir, uniting their houses and securing the new dynasty. But as Alaric's power grew, so did his arrogance. He now saw the Valerians as beneath him and was secretly negotiating Lyra's marriage to a foreign emperor's son for a far grander alliance. The secret the queen uncovered was a devastating betrayal. Her husband had not only built his throne on a lie, but he had sold their daughter's future before she was even born, and was now preparing to betray his most dangerous allies. This was the whisper that had festered into a cancer within the palace walls. The king's original sin was about to be laid bare, and the queen knew, with chilling certainty, that the ghosts of his past were coming to collect their debt. The revelation of the king's treachery came not from the queen, but from a servant loyal to House Valerius. The news spread like wildfire. Lord Valerius, enraged and humiliated, called his banners. He presented himself not as a rebel, but as a righteous enforcer of a sacred oath. He was joined by other nobles weary of Alaric's tyranny and fueled by the suffering of the common folk who were starving to fund the king's pointless wars. The rebellion was swift and brutal. The kingdom, a house of cards built on fear, collapsed overnight. The mob, once cheering for the royal family, now stormed the gates of the obsidian palace, their faces twisted with hunger and rage. The grand halls that had hosted masquerade balls now became battlegrounds, the air filled with the clang of steel, the splintering of priceless art, and the screams of the dying. The king's power, which had seemed so absolute, proved to be an illusion. The whispers had finally become a roar, and the palace was drowning in a river of blood. In the heart of the chaos, Queen Isolde had only one thought: to save her daughter. She tried to lead Princess Lyra through the secret passages she had discovered, hoping to escape the palace grounds. But fate is a cruel hunter. They were cornered in the queen's moonlit rose garden, the place of her only solace. There, surrounded by the trampled flowers she had so lovingly nurtured, they came face to face with Lord Valerius himself. His face was a mask of cold fury. The queen, with no guards left to protect her, stood before her terrified child, a lone beacon of defiance. She pleaded not for her own life, but for Lyra's, appealing to any honor he had left. But there was no honor, only vengeance. He saw in the queen the symbol of the king's broken promise. He raised his sword, and as it fell, the queen's last act was to push her daughter behind her. She died there among her roses, her lifeblood staining the white petals crimson. Her last sight was of her weeping daughter being dragged away into the darkness, her last sound the shattering of all her hopes. King Alaric was found not on the battlefield, but in the throne room, staring at the empty seat of power as if it could save him. His royal guards lay dead around him. He was no longer a king, just a man whose ambitions had crumbled into ash. They did not grant him a swift end. Lord Valerius wanted him to witness the totality of his failure. They dragged him to the central courtyard, the very place where he had celebrated his coronation, and forced him to watch as his royal banners were torn down and burned. It was there that he saw them carry the body of his beloved Queen Isolde, her moonlit hair stained with blood. A sound of pure agony, a sound no one had ever heard him make, escaped his lips. His punishment was not just death, but despair. They executed him at dawn, with the cold, indifferent stones of his own palace as his audience. As the axe fell, King Alaric, the great conqueror, the founder of a dynasty, died a traitor's death, his last breath a whisper of the name of the wife his arrogance had destroyed. For Princess Lyra, death would have been a mercy, but mercy was in short supply. Lord Valerius had no use for a dead princess, but a living one, a ghost, was a powerful symbol of his victory and the king's perfidy. She was not killed, nor was she married. She was erased. Taken to a remote, forgotten fortress on the storm-lashed coast, she was locked in the highest room of the tallest tower. Her name was struck from the royal records. The world was told she had perished in the rebellion alongside her parents. Princess Lyra, the jewel of the kingdom, vanished from history. She lived out her days as a prisoner of the sky and the sea, her only companions the mournful cries of gulls and the relentless crashing of waves against the rocks below. She became a local legend, a ghost story told by fishermen, the silent princess in the Sea Drake Tower. She died years later, alone and unremembered, her fragile destiny fulfilled not in a palace, but in a prison of stone and sorrow. The kingdom King Alaric had built and Lord Valerius had broken did not survive. Without a strong leader, the alliance of nobles fractured. They turned on one another, their greed and ambition plunging the land into decades of civil war. The great kingdom was carved up and devoured by its neighbors and its own internal strife, fading into a footnote in the history of other, more successful nations. The Obsidian Palace, the epicenter of the tragedy, was abandoned. Looted and burned, it was left to the mercy of time and the elements. The grand tapestries rotted, the marble floors cracked, and the whispers finally were joined by the howling of the wind. The throne room became a roost for crows, and the queen's rose garden was choked by thorns and weeds. The palace stood not as a symbol of a fallen king, but as a vast, silent tombstone for a family and a dream that had turned into a nightmare. It became a cursed place, a place of ghosts, a place where the weight of sorrow was too great for even time to wash away. Power is a phantom, ambition a poison, and legacy a fragile vanity. The tale of the Palace of Whispers is a testament to this grim truth. King Alaric reached for godhood and found only a grave. Queen Isolde offered love and was repaid with oblivion. Princess Lyra was born to be a symbol of hope and became a ghost of sorrow. Their story serves as a chilling reminder that the foundations of power are often laid with the bones of the innocent, and the pursuit of glory is a path that leads, inevitably, to ruin. The secrets buried within these walls teach us that a single lie, a single broken promise, can unravel an entire kingdom. The whispers are silent now, but their message endures, that thrones are the most dangerous of chairs, crowns the heaviest of burdens, and history is a relentless tide that swallows kings, queens, and princesses alike, leaving nothing behind but the echo of their tragic fall. History bleeds, and its echoes are written in the cries of kings, queens, and lost princesses. This was the Fear Room. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more dark history tales.